Oh, hi there. Welcome to Guinea Something Good, Behind the Scenes, your one-stop shop for behind-the-scenes information on Guinea Something Good. This series will be, hopefully, a weekly series, right now updating every Monday, in which we will go behind the scenes of Guinea Something Good, the comic strip and the animated series, and we will learn, how do these get made? How are they created? What process brings these projects to life? All these questions and more will be answered in Guinea Something Good, Behind the Scenes. I suppose I could have come up with a slightly more clever name, maybe Guinea Something Good, Behind the Panels, or Behind the Laughter, or Behind the Ink, or Behind the Squeaking, or something that relates to the content that I create. But behind the scenes describes it pretty spot on, and that's good enough for me, at least for now. Now, this video is actually a sequel to what I will now be calling Guinea Something Good Behind the Scenes Episode 0, which previously was called Guinea Something Good Cartoonist Commentary. So, what is Guinea Something Good Cartoonist Commentary, or what will now be called Episode 0? That was actually a behind-the-scenes look at creating a Guinea Something Good comic strip, and it was made in 2011. That's right, way back, before all the modern technological marvels that we now take for granted. I don't actually know or remember what's been invented since 2011, but if we went back in time, I'm sure we would all be sorely disappointed by the many things that we now take for granted that did not exist in that time. You know, let's see, 4K quality images would be one thing, I think. I still don't think I've actually seen that, so I can't say I'd miss it if I went back to 2011. Smart TVs weren't quite as prevalent. I think we still use DVDs, so maybe we'd be slightly inconvenienced. Honestly, I don't quite remember 2011 enough to have this be a segment on this video. So let's bail out now and save some face and move forward. Now, in this video, because this is a sort of sequel to that video made in 2011, what I'd like to do is compare and contrast the process used in the comic today versus the process used in the comic in that video. Much has remained the same. Some has changed. A lot has changed in the interim, but has been changed back to how it was back in that previous video. But let's not prologue any longer. Let's get right into the video, shall we? Okay, so here we are. The first phase of any comic strip, the writing process. Now, as you see, I am typing words into a word processor program called OpenOffice. Now, this video is time-lapsed, so I'm not writing that fast. My words per minute is not quite 1,000, or whatever this would be. But my process is a bit different than it was back in the previous video for writing. In the 2011 video, I mentioned that I used a Nintendo DS program. And what I would do is sketch in panels in this Nintendo DS art program and write a comic strip, a rough outline of a comic strip in that program, and then transfer the dialogue into a Word document, and then go from there. Now, since that time, I've stopped using the Nintendo DS to write, and I've started using a sketchbook. And most of the comics that I've written in the interim have been written in a sketchbook. I find that to be just a slightly more intuitive experience. My ideas seem to flow a little bit better with the physical media. However, I sort of did a little experiment with this particular comic strip, because it occurred to me that some of my best ideas often occur in the shower when really my subconscious reigns. My conscious thought process takes a backseat to the sort of random, chaotic musings of my subconscious. Something about that enclosed environment where there's no stimulation to your visual senses or auditory senses sort of creates this bubble in which your mind sort of races between all sorts of different thoughts. So I thought maybe I would use that to my advantage. And what I did was I thought of an idea before I took the shower, and then I just thought of a rough outline, just basically a rough starting point, and then let my mind sort of wander. And really, I came up with 90% of the dialogue in the shower. And then when I got back to the computer, I just wrote it down as best as I could remember, and then spent some time refining it. So I feel like it worked. I'm not sure if it's a process that I'll continue, or if I'll decide that it's not worth the time invested and the effort, since obviously it's less effort just to open a sketchbook and start writing. But it can be a little intimidating to try to write a brand new comic strip on a blank page, and it was a bit easier to have the whole thing mapped out in my mind and then start refining the writing in the program, in the Word document. Well, that was quite a lot on the writing process, and we've seen quite a bit of the comic creation go by, but what I would like to mention is that in the previous video I used a file that had all sorts of different poses of a character, and what I would do is open that file, copy a pose, and paste it in the other file that I was working on for the comic. Since then, I've changed this a little bit, and I've created objects in Flash, because in Flash you can create an object that has multiple frames, and so those frames I have as different poses of the character, and you can simply cycle through those poses. So it's just a bit more efficient, and the nice thing is that if you go into that object and you change a drawing, then any panel or any frame that has that object in it and has that pose in it will automatically change. So it's very convenient, it's very efficient. And in this case, I took the Joe object and I duplicated it and I modified it to be a new one-shot character. And before I modified it, I just chose which poses I would use, and then I edited those poses, and I only needed to edit them once, because every time a pose was duplicated, it automatically changed to the new modified version of the Joe object. So that's a very convenient way to do it. Now the word bubbles have changed since the previous video. Before I would make circular word bubbles, and now I'm drawing them with straight lines, just as a little stylistic decision. But I'm still creating the word bubble borders the same way, which is to take the white fill, copy it, make it black, and expand it, goes around and creates a border. But there you see it right there. It creates a nice, clean border. And it's also kind of interesting because you're able to make the top and left lines a little bit thinner than the bottom and right lines. So it creates kind of an interesting visual element. Now, in the same way as the previous video, I make each frame a separate panel, and then I export each frame in an image sequence. Then I import those frames into Photoshop and arrange the panels based on a previous comic's arrangement. As I mentioned earlier, this process actually hasn't remained in the entirety of these 3.5 years. I've drawn the comic many different ways, but finally I've come back to virtually the same process that I used in that video. It's just a very efficient way to make a comic, and because I'm working on so many projects, the animated series, the game, and I want to update the comic as much as I can, efficiency really matters. I can't really afford to spend more time than necessary on any given project. You have to balance the frequency of updates with the time spent on each update. And oftentimes, time can relate directly to quality, but in a case like this, the quality of the comic, I don't think, is hindered by the fact that I reuse art. I think that's become part of the charm of the comic strip, especially because these are guinea pig characters. So guinea pigs are naturally sort of immobile creatures, and reusing art sort of simulates that. Well, that's the end of that video. So thank you for joining me. Like I said, I will be trying to update this series once a week. For now, we'll talk about the comics. I'll try to get into the animations too, and maybe anything else I'm working on, or whatever I feel like talking about. It's pretty open-ended. If you have any questions, or if you have any ideas of things that you'd like me to discuss or talk about in future episodes, feel free to leave a comment below, and I will do my best to address all your suggestions. Thanks for watching.